So let me give you 6 reasons here, okay? So the first one is actually a biblical one. So first one is something that we are all used to. Bible tells us so. Okay? Bible tells us that God exists. How do we know that? If you read John 1:1, it says that at the beginning there was Word. Word became flesh. And Word was God. And Word became flesh and it dwelt among us. So we know that God was Word. And Logos, that's the Greek word for the word that is used there. Logos is the beginning of everything. God is the beginning of everything. That's what the Bible teaches us. The Bible also tells us in Psalm 14:1, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. That there are people who will say there is no God. The Bible has a very clear definition of those people. It calls it fools. You know, don't say that to people when you meet with them and they say, we don't believe in God. You're a fool. Don't do that. But, you know, objectively, that's what the Bible does. Most people who don't believe in the existence of God, fools. So this is one. But people like that exist. They will say, there's no God. I don't believe. And I don't believe your Bible. Okay, how can we do better than that? Did God leave his footprints or his fingerprints on this earth? Can we look somewhere else and maybe find a hint of God? And the answer is yes, of course. So number two is called ontological argument or religious argument. Again, it's a little bit tied to Bible, but it's not. It's really not. It's a philosophical argument for existence of God, and it basically states the following. Believing in God is the most logical thing that you can ever come up with. And so the evidence for that is mostly the fact that wherever you go to tribes in Mozambique, you go to tribes in Amazon, you go to tribes in anywhere, and what do you find? People believe in God. People always believe in God. There is a natural inclination in the human's heart to believe in God. In fact, the Bible says in Ecclesiastes 3:11, Ecclesiastes 3:11, here's what it says. He has planted eternity in the human heart. God has planted eternity in our heart. There is a natural inclination in our heart to believe that God exists. It's a logical thing. For some of you, for us who believe in God, it's the most logical thing. We are like, you don't have to prove me that God exists. I know it. This is the most, if I did anything right in my life, this will be it. Believing that God exists. Okay, well, people will say that's not enough for me. Well, then you go to point number 3, and we call this a first cause argument. A first cause argument. First cause. Первое начало. It's also called cosmological argument sometimes. You can put it in brackets, cosmological argument. Basically, it goes in 3 steps. How do you go about it? First one, you say that the universe has a beginning. The second point, everything that has a beginning must have a cause, must have been caused by something else. Since the universe has the beginning, it should have been caused by something else, and that first cause is God. Now I'm going to go through these steps in slow. Everything, let's go with point number 1. The universe has the beginning. Okay? Is that true or not? If you went to Aristotle's times, in Greek times, people believed the universe always existed. They believed that there was always the universe, that this planet always existed, everything always existed. And therefore you don't need a beginning. Okay, that would be fine if that was the case. The problem is that the universe has the beginning, and we know that. For a fact, and it's the most proven fact since the last 50 years. Scientists discovered that first 2 laws of thermodynamics actually say the following. The first law of thermodynamics says the amount of usable energy is constant. And the second law of thermodynamics says that the usable energy, the amount of that energy, depletes over time. We are moving towards the state of what they call entropy. And the idea is that, think about a car. You pump the gas into the car, it can run for a long time. If it's a really good, really efficient car, okay, great, it's going to run, for thousands of miles. But at one point of time, the guess is going to be gone. And it would stop. And so the point is, if these laws are the most proven laws in physics, if that's the case, and the universe has always existed, so it's been millions, billions, trillions years ago, then we should have run to zero energy, basically. Right? We shouldn't have that gas anymore. I mean, it cannot go for infinity, so it could not have existed always. So the universe has the beginning. The one problem, the scientists say, the Big Bang is the beginning of everything. So let's go to the second point about this argument. It says that everything that has a beginning must have a cause. Okay? Everything that has a beginning must have a cause. So for example, if you see that this watch that's been done in some specific year, it should have been caused by something. Okay? Everything that has a beginning has a cause. And the scientists say, well, the cause of the universe is the Big Bang. Where did the Big Bang come from? What is the Big Bang? It's basically a small, tiny bit of massive energy. They call it a quantum vacuum. And all that energy was concentrated in that tiny bit of piece, and then it all exploded suddenly. And we got stars, you know, human beings, my jacket came out of it. But anyway, that's basically the theory. The problem still, I'm not going to go into that. I mean, I think that they have much more faith than I do. You know, believing that there was nothing, you know, this tiny bit of dot exploded and everything came out like this, just don't, I mean, I don't have that kind of faith. You can call me faithless in that regard. But if you think about it, more deeper, what caused this massive energy to exist? We are back to square number one. Who created that massive energy? Okay, everything that has the beginning must have a cause. We have a Big Bang causing the universe. What caused this quantum vacuum to exist? We don't know. And that will be where the scientist stops. When the science stops and the faith begins, they will tell you about the parallel universes and tell you a lot of things that you never heard before. The way that Christians, and I think that's the most logical explanation, is that the first cause of the universe was God. And God does not have the beginning. Because you can go ahead and people will ask you, well, who created God? Right? If everything that had a beginning should have a cause, then who created God? Very simple. God does not have the beginning. God does not have the beginning. In fact, God is the creator of time. He's the creator of time continuum. You never think about God in terms of inches, do you? How tall is he? Or is he really overweight or is he underweight? What do you think? Why we never think about it? How about how old is he? Is he 25 years old? 355 million? Or what? What's his age? It doesn't make sense, right? These questions. Why? Because God exists outside of these dimensions. He created the three-dimensional space. He created weight. He created all these dimensions that we can measure. And He created the time. He is the creator of time. So you cannot just basically say who created God. I mean, you cannot measure God by the things that He created. He is outside the time. So we have no problem. Universe is the beginning. God, who exists outside the time, created universe and created time for that purpose. We are people who live in time. The time dimension was created by God. And this is it. And you have no problem, no mathematical flaw in this argument. So it's called the first cause argument that can explain the existence of God. Now, let's go to the fourth one. It's called argument from design. And whenever you think about that, think about my car, or think about your watch, or think about anything like this. Design. The first one, the arguments, the first one was the Bible, religious argument, ontological argument, then the third one was the first cause, and now we have a fourth one, argument by design. So it goes like this. All design implies a designer. There is a great design in the universe, therefore there must be a great designer. So here's the example. Look at this watch. I'm claiming that this watch has a very well design. It has a very complicated stuff inside. If you put it apart, if you're as curious as me, probably at one point of time you did it when you were a kid. So there is a big design behind this. Therefore, what's your conclusion about this? There must be some intelligence that put this together. You wouldn't say, if I were to tell you, okay guys, here's what would happen. I was walking on the street, I saw this bunch of dirt, I picked it up, I threw it in the air, and here it is. This is my watch. That's how I got it. And then you would say, well, we have a place for you. It's called an insanity home. You know, you can go there and stay there. Right? Because it doesn't make sense. The only thing that makes sense is that if there is a design to this watch, there is a designer that designed this watch. Now let's look at the universe. The universe is way billions, billions, billions times more complicated than this. Therefore, there has to be a designer that created that design. If you think about the cosmological constant, and that's the term that physicists use, basically it tells you all the constants in physics that exist. One is gravity. What's the gravity number? Do you remember that measurement? 9.8.1, it goes 981. And it continues on and on and on. Here's the deal. If that constant, that gravity constant, was a little bit higher, then we would basically be down to our earth and couldn't even walk. It would be so strong. If it was a little bit, a couple percent lower, we would simply fly into the space. But it's tuned just precisely so that we can walk on earth. Now this is only one, gravity. There is electromagnetic force. There is atomic force. There are hundreds of constants like these in physics, and all of them are tuned just precisely so that our universe could work. And that's what I call the cosmological constant, which a combination of all of these is tuned so well that it's to the magnitude of 120, which means it's billions, trillions, billions of trillions, and if I were just saying that over and over, maybe in 1 hour we would be done. Basically, that's the complexity, way more than that. Therefore, the ultimate response, there is a design. There is a great design to the universe. It could not have been caused by random chance. There is a design. So that's called the argument from design. Number 5. So let's say people still ask me, well, I don't believe you. Well, there is a moral argument, or we call this an information argument. And the idea here, there are objective moral values. Objective, okay? Objective, this is an important word. They're not just moral values, they're objective moral values that everybody agrees upon. Therefore, God exists. Because the objective moral values just morality as a whole could not have come, is not a material thing. It's not material. Scientists agree about that it's not a matter. Therefore, it's not a material thing. How do we get morals? Well, there are a couple of explanations. Maybe our parents gave us our morals, our society, right? How did our parents get their morals? Their parents did. How about their parents? Oh, okay, so where do we stop? Nowhere. The idea is basically somewhere the morals came, and these are objective morals. We know what's good and evil. To a big extent, I'm not saying about little things, but on the grand scheme of things, like killing people, we know that this is wrong. And you're going to feel that in your heart if you do that, because you have consciousness. Consciousness is not a material thing. So that's basically how you go about the moral argument. So our parents couldn't have given us. By the way, evolution is the last explanation of this. Evolutionists, they never talk about morals, because evolution cannot explain morality. In fact, the theory of evolution, survival of the fittest, is completely against the morality. It says you should take care of yourself and basically completely disregard another person. Morality says you should care about another person. So that's completely against the theory of evolution. The only plausible explanation that people have, that the information, the morality came outside the system. Again, outside physical system, God. God exists because there are moral. This is, by the way, moral argument is one of the most objective arguments for the philosophers. most of the philosophers that you will meet a lot of philosophers are believers. They're not necessarily Christians, but they believe in God. They believe in the higher universe, because once you study a lot of philosophy, you understand that this is the only solid, reasonable argument for morality is God. Nothing else. Now, the last one, I'm going to call it a personal argument. And this is something that all of us have. You are the evidence of God. Never underestimate this value. You are the evidence of God. That God exists. I'm the evidence that God exists. I know my life. I know how I was before. I know my friends who were in sin, who were in disease, who were in addictions. And when Christ came to their life are no more the same. And I know that this is supernatural. And I know that God exists because of their lives. Our lives we are the walking evidence of God. And a witness, direct witness, is the most valuable witness in a defensive court. So don't underestimate that. So we have 6 basic points that we can basically introduce our children to when they ask, Mom, Dad, Sunday school teacher, does God exist? Well, Bible teaches us. Okay, besides Bible. Okay, well, let me go through all these different points. And remember, our task is to plant a seed. You don't need to grow it. You need to plant it. Another thing, we still have a little bit of time, so I'm going to talk about evolution. Okay? That's another question, big question that in apologetics we're trying to answer. So there are 2 big theories that are trying to explain the origin of life. One is called evolution theory. The other one is called creationism or intelligent design theory. Okay? Have you heard of that? If you do Google search, go in quotation, you put evolution theory, you probably will find about references to about, I did it just recently, about more than 1 million times. If you put in quotation creation theory, you'll find the references to about 200,000 times. So, evolution wins in terms of citation. But let me just give you the arguments that they provide. And now let me give you the arguments that we provide as creationists and just weigh them, okay? So let's look at evolution theory. Evolution theory says that all living creatures are modified descendants of a common ancestor. Which means that everybody, all of us, came from the same thing. That's what evolutionary theory says. Now here are the problems. If evolutionary theory is true, if that's the case, then first of all, the Bible is wrong. Because the Bible says that God created us. So Bible is wrong. Second, there is no foundation for right or wrong if there is evolution. Because, I mean, why should be there any morals? We came out of the one cell. I mean, morality is just not defined by anything. The racism is completely justified. Because, I mean, we know that we value human life more than the dog's life. If there is a choice, we're going to destroy the dog and save the human life, right? Then what about humans that are slightly advanced than the other humans? Yeah, totally fine. By evolution theory, that's what Hitler believed. He said that Aryan race is superior, and therefore it's totally fine by Darwinian theory to destroy survival of the fittest. So we have a huge problem if the evolution theory is correct. What are the evidences for evolution? Well, let me give you the experiments that you learn in your books in biology. First one is what we call a Miller-Urey experiment. The experiment is the following. You put stuff like you try to simulate how the Earth would look like as they claim millions of years ago. So you would put a lot of stuff in it, a lot of dirt, a lot of things, non-living organisms. You would try to shake it, put a lot of water there, and try to do some electricity through it, and see what happens. Basically, let's try to create my clock, my watch, by shaking it. And so what the scientists find that under certain conditions, you can create an amino acid. Okay? Here's the problem. I mean, I love to see the things that happen, but also, what does it mean that you can create amino acid? Well, amino acid is one of the blocks of protein, and proteins are the building blocks for the living cells. But here's the one thing that they forget to mention. Amino acid is not a living cell. There is a billion of steps that from amino acid to become a protein, and there is even an infinitely billion of steps to it for it to become a living cell. So the fact that you can create an amino acid doesn't mean anything. I mean, just anything. It just says that you can create amino acid. It doesn't say that you can create life. So Miller array experiment is just simply says that you can create amino acid under those conditions. That's fine. Even though, by the way, even that experiment hasn't been replicated, but that's besides the point. Even if it was 100% correct. The second evidence for evolution is usually they put the Darwinian tree of life, and you probably have seen this. You know, when basically you have a monkey, looks like this, and then a little bit further you have, you know, a bit straighter monkey, you know, but still kind of a monkey, humanish kind of thing, and then you have a human. You know, they have a new tree saying that, you know, now we are becoming more like this because we're working at the computers, you know, so it goes the other way around. But anyway, that's not to the point. The point is that if you look at the monkey and you look at the human, we know that those exist. What is the problem is all these missing links. All the missing links. And not only for that specific diagram, but it also goes with cats and dogs. I mean, there has to be some links between them. There has to be some links between frogs and reptiles. There has to be some links between birds and reptiles. I mean, where are all those links? So billions and billions of these links are missing. How about this? Maybe they never existed. Maybe just they never existed. We came up with a theory that just doesn't work. And they actually, well, the scientists will go further and they'll say, well, let's try to dig up and find, you know, do some anthropology, find, you know, paleontology, look at the stones, find the fossils, and put the things together. Maybe there is evidence in the stones. And they do that, and there was an article published in Geographic, what's that? National Geographic's journal about 10 years ago. They found the missing link. They called it Archaeoraptor. Basically, a missing link between the bird and the reptile. They had a skeleton of dinosaur that had a tail like a reptile and also had feathers, you know, so it was kind of a birdie thing. So anyway, they called it with this kind of ridiculous name. And they said it's a missing link between these two. 5 years later, these scientists were fired as a fraud. What they did, they put the real skeleton of the dinosaur and they put the skeleton of a chicken. They melted it together, and here came the chicken dinosaur. But here's, I mean, do you see the problem? I mean, these things are so made up so many times. There's so much falsifiability in those evidences, and we're taking it for a face value. Those diagrams are still in the books. Here's another one. Another one is called Haeckel's embroidered drawing. So basically, if you've seen that in the biology book, you see basically different embryos. There's a frog, embryon. Frog, fish, some kind of other animal, human, and then they kind of show development over the month as they basically develop, you know, as the embryos. And they basically, what they show is that at the end they look very different. But at the beginning, they look very similar. Humans look just like frogs, you know? And, well, the one thing that that book doesn't probably mention a lot is that this scientist in 1960 was accused by his own fellows in 1960s. It's a long time ago. That this was a fraud. That this is not how it is, in fact. Well, the fact of our time is we can actually scan the human body. We can scan and see how these embryos look at the very early stage of their life. Look on the internet for it. I don't have any slides, but look at it. You'll be amazed. They look nothing alike. So this scientist was accused of fraud. We have these pictures still today in our books. So this is how this evidence is produced. Another evidence for evolution is they say that 99%, well, this is true, 99% of DNA code in a monkey is the same as in a human being. So you and me, we share 99% of the same DNA code. And we also share it with our friend chimpanzee. 99%. Therefore, so let's look at this evidence, and their conclusion is, Therefore, they come from the common ancestor. They come from the same thing. Because you have 99% and the monkey has 99%. Therefore, we come from another thing. I wish I had a board here, but let's do a thought experiment. I'm going to paint a painting here. Let me just sign that painting. Okay, I'm going to paint another painting. It's going to be slightly different, you know, more funny. I'm going to sign it. And then somebody goes and like looks at these paintings and says, beautiful. I mean, this is so much different than this. But look, I mean, it's like the same colors, everything the same. Even the signatures look the same. They must have come from the third painting. That painting, you know, it just should have caused these two. And you will think about that argument and you will say, you're crazy. What it says, and actually look at the signature, it's the same. It says that there is the same painter that painting these two paintings. When you look at the DNA and saying, oh, the DNA in the monkey is similar to DNA in a human being, of course. God created both of them. He put the signature on both of them. DNA is the signature of God. But you look at the same evidence and you interpret it in a completely different way. And that's the problem with a lot of science. You look at the evidence and there are a lot of interpretations. And we have to learn how to interpret it in a way that is biblical, in a way that we believe is correct. And I know for a fact that it is. I will have to have so much more faith than I have right now to believe that I came from monkey. If some people do, well, maybe they do. How about the alternative? How about the creation theory? By the way, evidence against evolution is very, very vast. Like mutation. So evolution promotes mutation, saying the mutations are going to cause the driving forces of evolution is mutation. Here's one thing. Mutation does not produce complexity. If anything, mutation is harmful to the processes of development. If you think about a person who has some kind of defect, the likelihood of survival for that person is much lower, not greater. Okay, so mutation is completely a stumbling block for the evolution. Another thing is random process, as we already talked, does not produce complexity. So the whole thing about, you know, oh, this randomly somehow interaction happened and everything just caused this evolutionary, you know, human to arise. Randomness does not cause complexity. It's design that causes this watch. It's design that causes the complexity. As we talked also about all the missing links, right? We were ready to cover that. And the last one, think about, I mean, this is kind of silly one, but think about this. What does the evolution say? It says that we should have a monkey that developed into a man, but here's the deal. There has to be another monkey at the same time developing into the woman. Because that's the only way you can reproduce, right? I mean, you have to have male and female. And imagine what the likelihood of the evolution to produce man, now quadruple that into billions and trillions of times, that you should have female at the same time. So they were supposed to evolve at the same time. These two Adam and Eves at the beginning of, I mean, it's just ridiculous. I don't know, as a scientist, it doesn't fit my definition of a science. How about creation theory? The alternative that we believe in is intelligent design. We believe that intelligent design says basically that God created the universe and all living creatures. God is the designer of the complexity. God is the designer of our body. And Genesis 1, it says that God created us as human beings. He created man and women in His own image. Here's one thing. Here are the consequences of this, by the way. This is important. If that's true, if the theory of creation is true, then first of all, Bible is correct. Right? Because that's how what Bible teaches us. Second of all, there is right and wrong. Because there is a moral creator who created human beings, so therefore there has to be morals and human value. There is right and wrong. Third of all, people are equal before God. You cannot justify racism. God created them. Black, white, red, green, I don't know what kind of people there are, but you know, they are all equal because God has created them. And the last one, we will have to give an account to our Creator. We will have to stand before God and give an account because He's the one who created us. And this is usually why people don't want to accept this argument. Because it signifies our responsibility as human beings before God. If we believe that God created human life, we are responsible for Him for our life. Now, what are the evidences for intelligent design? Design in physics. We already talked about. It's a lot of evidences that we have for the existence of God. So there is a complexity in the universe. It's called sometimes fine-tuning theory. The universe is so fine-tuned. Designing the origin of life, the origin of information.